Welcome back to another episode of the Canon. I'm your host Terry, and today you are in for a treat because I am about to wax poetic about Man of Steel by Zack Snyder, starring Henry Cavill. So I'm sure most people want to hear that, so just stick around, and I'm gonna just tell you why I love Man of Steel. I honestly don't even know what I'm gonna say. I'm just gonna espouse my love. That's what's about to happen. So, at the time of recording this, I just finished watching the movie. And don't be worried. I watch the movie all the time, multiple times a year. So don't worry. This hasn't been a long time since I've seen it. This wasn't a refresher. I just enjoy watching the movie. So I've talked about Man of Steel before in the past on the other channel and stuff, but hey, why not? Actually, this is more of a series. I'm going to talk about the things I love and why anyway, but I want to kick it off with Man of Steel because it's a movie that's dear to my heart. So I'll just start here. I remember when this was coming out, this was a time, actually, this is the exact movie that got me into the whole movie news and movie world. Before then, I was a casual fan like most people probably are, where, I see a trailer. Sometimes you might see an article somewhere or hear about something. Now with technology and social media now, you see stuff a lot more. But honestly, if you're not looking for it, you won't see a whole bunch. So even though it was a Superman movie, I actually did hear a little bit about it before it started filming, but I didn't really know much. And so it just so happened to come at a time where I was still in college, and like Netflix was booming at the time because that's when Netflix had all the old stuff. They didn't have a ton of original content. And so all the great shows was on there. One of the things that I loved on there, me and my brothers always watched, was Justice League, the cartoon show. So the animated Justice League Unlimited. Loved that growing up, was able to watch it on Netflix at times, good. And I remember having this conversation around this time. I was just like, why is Superman the Boy Scout? Like, everybody says the big blue Boy Scouts, the goody two shoes. I'm like, but why? Like, I don't know if I was just at that age where I seen enough of the world to start to ask these questions or what, but I was just like, you just wouldn't just be like that just because, especially if you weren't human. And I'm like, so there has to be a reason. Like the Kryptonians weren't all like that, obviously. So why is he just so, happy-go-lucky? And we didn't really have an answer. And as I found out, people don't really care. But I cared. And so when this movie came out, or when it was announced, and I was reading about it from Christopher Nolan, who wrote the story and all that, and this was fresh off the heels of the Dark Knight series. It was just like, we're going to take it to a grounded level. We're going to treat it, how would Superman, or how would people react if Superman actually came to Earth? And so obviously with Superman, there's a level of fantasy and sci-fi there, but they wanted to treat it on the real world terms, not just the comic book way. And as we've seen so far going forward, there's definitely room for that. It wasn't at the time when this came out, but since then, not just the movies, but the different TV shows and stuff, we got people like mature adult storylines with these type of characters. But at the time, that's just not what people wanted. But anyway, that's what I wanted. And so after this movie, I came out just like, it answered that question. The thing that I love that Nolan and Goyer and Snyder, they all did with this, is that they took that story of Superman and they really elevated it. They elevated it past the surface level. And then you can see that with every single person in the movie. I think that's probably the biggest draw for me, namely Superman. We know the story. He comes to Earth. He becomes Superman. He's a force for good and all that. And that's just, the narrative on the surface. But this movie goes into that. And it talks and shows you, and it has the message about him having to go through these struggles to understand what it meant to have restraint, what it meant to have compassion, empathy, what it meant to be human. Some partly the things that Jor-El wanted him to go through. Like he said, they wanted you to see what it meant to be human, so then you could be the bridge. And then part of it, what his other father, Jonathan, wanted, where he wanted him to have that restraint so that he could make the right decisions. And all that informs him becoming Superman. You know, this idea that he grows up fine, has a perfectly happy life, but he knows he has superpowers. One day they just like, hey, you're alien. And he's like, okay, I'm Superman. I'm going to save the world. Like, that to me is great and all for when it started back in the day in 38. But for today, I felt like, or at least at the time and still now, I felt like we could go deeper than that. And this movie really justified a lot of it. That it wouldn't be easy. I mean, if you were growing up with all these things happening to you, because it's not your 18th birthday, you got powers. No, he grew up like this. And people would think he's a little weird because he doesn't know what's going on. And so to see the ugliness of the world, I think, to see the capacity of humans, ugliness, I think makes it more powerful for him to then decide to be Superman. And even though in this movie it was more so not really a choice, it just kind of all happened at once, I still like the trajectory that it showed. And so that's just the main character, Clark Kent. But then you talk about Zod and Jor-El and Krypton, and way to elevate this material. Now, Krypton has been shown in a bunch of different ways, but for the most part, we know it was a planet that ended up being destroyed because it's that theme of its core, overreacting. Now, I think even with this movie, and again, this storyline has been there, but I just really feel like it has such a poignant message at the time and even now about how we treat our planet. And if you look at what Zack Snyder does with other stuff in this, he just really has a sensibility about things that I really appreciate it. And I'll get into that a little later. But as far as Krypton, it really did. It was just like, look, we went to population control. And that was what we thought would help. And we stopped exploring. We stopped funding our space, exploration and all that. And that's just what we had. And then from there, we overused our resources. And now we messed up the core. The world's going to be destroyed. And I think about it now with space, being back on the map now and the conversations about that. And then we all know the conversations about climate change and everything. So I just thought that was interesting, but it creates a real stake in understanding for what's going on. Zod and Jor-El, in a way that we haven't really ever seen them in the movies, especially, were kind of on the same page, where it was like, look, the leaders are screwing us. But Jor-El wants to do a coup. He wants to do a mutiny. I mean, not Jor-El, Zod wants to do a mutiny as the military leader. And so he's like, my job is to protect, kind of like the whole AI, artificial intelligence robot thing. My job is to protect you. And it's clear that the way to protect you is to get rid of you because you're screwing yourself. And that's kind of what he does. But then Jor-El's like, yeah, they're screwing us, but it's other ways to take care of it. And so it's an interesting triangle. I like that it wasn't just some black and white dichotomy. They made an interesting murky triangle where, as we see a lot of this happen in the real world, where people attach their selves to your cause, even though you have different opinions. So Jor-El and Zod weren't really enemies like that. They just had two different ways they wanted to get to the same goal. And then ultimately it was the destruction of Krypton happened anyway. So all that I love, but the thing that was brilliant was this idea of the Codex. So the Codex does a couple things. I think number one, it kind of gives you it gives Zod a much more deeper reasoning to why he's after the Earth, why he's after Clark and everything. But on top of that, it just adds this new layer to the story, because they say that the Codex pretty much predetermines every citizen's birth and what they're born to do. Whether you're born to be a scientist, a warrior, military, a leader, whatever it is, everybody has a predetermined role. And then the Codex is the thing that determines that. But anyway, because Kal-El is a natural birth, he can have the freedom to determine whatever he wants to be. Now, honestly, I think you could stop there. But then you add the Codex in, and that's inside the blood of Superman. He carries all of Krypton with him. And so I think there's a nice symbolism there, and that's a reason for Zod to have motivation to go after him. But the idea of freedom, of choice, is really the central theme that rings throughout this movie. And you see it as Superman is growing up and as his father, because it wasn't like his parents were just like, hey, you're supposed to be the leader of these people, you're supposed to be the savior, whatever. They just said you have to make a choice eventually, and whatever choice you make is going to change the world either way. We just want to make sure that you understand enough and have the knowledge so that when you make the choice, you can make an informed decision. And so they were never pushing him to be anything. And we see that throughout this movie in BVS. It was really this idea of choice. And that goes back to Krypton and him being the natural birth and everything, where Krypton, everybody was just, they were narrow-minded into who they were supposed to be. You got the council ignoring what everybody's saying and letting the world be destroyed. You got Zod in the military not caring what they do to people. I mean, caring, but they execute it because it's in the name of protecting Krypton. And so obviously these two people, Jor-El and Laurel, like, they have this different mindset that then is embodied through their son. And so it's really much more deeper to me than any other Superman stories I heard. And so I absolutely love that. And then so through all that, I just think the story is really strong. And then I really just like the execution of some things in the movie, or a lot of things in the movie, including the visual flair. And like I was saying that about Zack. So I just think some of the details was nice. Like, it doesn't have to be this big rah-rah look at me type thing, diversity, look what I'm doing. I think it was nice that when Zod had that message, which was a great scene, it was really creepy the way they did it with all the static and him wearing his mask. That was cool. But you watch that scene and it's showing on Clark's screen, and it could have just been there. It could have just been there in the Daily Planet. But no, he shows you this message in all types of languages. He shows you all types of different faces around the world. And it reminds me of BVS the same way. He shows you Dias de los Muertos. He shows you different things. And it doesn't have to be this rah-rah in your face thing. It's just that he just naturally, or I won't give Zack all the credit, but either him or someone around him naturally just has these things in them to show you more and to show you a wide open world. And so, but it adds to the threat of Zod in them, but it also just gives you a nice visual. I mean, the same way that you see Clark on these random jobs, working in a restaurant with truckers, working on rigs and the ships, just different kind of salt of the earth type things, and showing a different way of life and showing how you can see the ugliness and sometimes the goodness of humans as well. But again, that to me, it all culminates into an impactful decision, because again, it's just not impactful for me for Clark Kent to be like, hey, I'm Superman. yeah, I'm gonna save the world and I'm gonna be, big boy scout, blah blah blah. He had to understand, and it was a lot of stuff. It was not only him seeing people's capacity for evil, but seeing people's capacity for good. Also, the symbol of the House of L is hope. I love all that integration in the story and everything, and it was just a number of different things. And to me, it wasn't, when he finally culminated to be Superman, wasn't this idea of just, hey, I'm here to save the day because I'm supposed to save the day. It wasn't this undue burden like another show, or another thing I absolutely love, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'll talk about that one day. But it wasn't just this undue burden. It was a choice that he got to make. And it wasn't even really like, hey, I'm going to just save y'all. It's just, I think for him, it was a culmination that he owed a lot of people that gave him something when he had nothing. And they gave him love. And I think it's really, a lot of it is him just paying that back and paying it forward to other people. And I love that because it's so much more realistic. And then down the lines, I know Zack Snyder wanted to get to a point where he was the more jovial Superman. And I think we would have got there, but this was an excellent start. It was an excellent start to tell you why. And that's, for me, the biggest thing that I wanted. Not that I didn't love Superman. And come to find out subsequently, a lot of people hate on him, especially after Marvel got big. People like, he's just too powerful. I always loved Superman. But I did want more to why, and this added to it. I mean, there's a little bit of that in Justice League and in the Superman show, where you talk about restraint, and it's sometimes like he's angry and people don't understand. It's hard for him to restrain himself. Not hard, but he's almost always restraining himself. And I saw a little bit there, but with this movie, it really added a good dimension to that. And it teaches so much to what's going to go into ultimately who Superman is. And so it's just some great themes in there. It's some great literary themes. I mean, you think about this idea of destiny, predetermination with Zod. Like he said, my sole purpose of me being born was to protect Krypton, and now there's no Krypton. And then his decision, really, because actually, I mean, I might be looking into it, but his decision after that, because you think about it in a nice duality moment, once they got rid of everything and there was no more Genesis Chamber, there was no more, any way they can do the world engine, Zod has a choice now. Because now, like he said, my only sole purpose was to protect Krypton. Now it's gone. Now he has a choice for the first time in his life. And so, we think about Thanos, we think about other people, like, what's the difference between a villain and a hero? It's the choices you make. And so he had a choice. He was free now of that burden, and he made the choice to want to kill and get revenge. And that could have easily been Clark had he not grown up there and everything. But there's so much like that in there that's really juicy and deep with the story and the lore of Superman. I love the adaptation, like I already talked about, with a lot of the codex and a lot of Krypton. But even this idea, well, kind of, they were going to have a Fortress of Solitude, but they got rid of it. And actually, this was the first time I realized that, because Zod ended up taking the scout ship that was there that Clark parked in the Antarctic. But even that idea, they had scout ships everywhere, and they were looking at different planets, and this idea that the only reason Zod and them made this because they were banished to the Phantom Zone, and then when Krypton got destroyed, they got freed, and they were able to go through all these other different outposts and recoup some supplies and everything. Like, it was just really well thought out. I love the building and the adaptation of all the Superman stuff. And it just, to me, it really came together in a really strong movie. But also it was a good character journey for Clark. To see him becoming Superman and really making the choice why. But then you see that pushed even further in BVS, which I'm getting ready to watch. Love that movie too. And so, yeah, man, it's just so much I love about it. I'm sure I'm forgetting some stuff But overall, I think it satisfied a need that I had at the time. But even growing, past those days and rewatching it and revisiting it, I still love it. I love the portrayal that Henry Cavill does. He has really good acting chops. People don't give him enough. I love Lawrence Fishburne as Perry. There's some things that I'm not a super fan of in the movie, but overall, I think it's just really strong. Like, I love the way the story flowed. I know some people didn't, but I love the way the story flowed. I think it all made sense when they showed you certain things, and just a lot of it ties together. If you really pay attention to the things throughout the movie, a lot of it ties together. A lot of it has literary and narrative purpose. When you see and hear things, it kind of comes back later. And so I just absolutely love the movie, in my personal opinion. And I'm trying to make sure I don't forget anything, but yeah. Now, the one thing I will say, I'll throw this out there, the cape doesn't make sense to me. I mean, kind of. Here's the thing. So they wore capes, and obviously the Superman suit is like the bodysuit that people wore in Krypton, but I don't know why his was red. That was the only thing, because Jor-El's wasn't red. Like, it was like a navy blue, and he had a cape too earlier in the movie, but it wasn't red. That was the only thing. I was just like, why is his boots and his cape red and his symbol red? But whatever. Maybe it faded out over time. I don't know. And his was brand new. Who knows? But anyway, that's it. So go to comment section. Let me know what you think about Man of Steel. Look, I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm just talking about why I love it. If you disagree, that's fine. But let me know what you think about the movie. Share it around. Get the conversation started. Remember, if you heard it here, it's official canon.